Yeah, it's interesting. At performance period 3, 33% of practices were able to achieve a shared savings. I think that was somewhat concerning because that stayed stable since performance period 2. So in performance period 2, there's also 33% of practices that achieved a savings. In performance period 1, it had been 25%. So between PP1 and PP2, we saw growth or improvement. I personally was hoping that we'd continue to see aggregate improvement in performance in terms of achieving a shared savings. That unfortunately didn't happen, so that aspect of performance leveled out. The other thing that was important about the results that we saw from performance period 3 is that we've gotten additional data on what's happened in the true-up period. So true-ups are roughly Medicare claims can be sent in over about a year after a service is provided. So in value-based models, you continue to look at what happens as claims roll out or into Medicare. So between performance period 1, the number of practices that retained a shared savings went from 25% to 20%. For performance period 2, it went from 33% to 25%. So there's kind of two trends I think that are concerning with the results of shared savings. One is we've leveled out in terms of the proportion of practices that have achieved a shared savings. And then in the true-up process, we're seeing a regression in the results. Now, from what we understand from Medicare, different practices are getting shared savings at different times. So overall, from what they've said is that from the start of the program, around 50% of all the participants have achieved at least one shared savings. So I feel like there's progress in certain respects, but in aggregate, I think there's still concerns over where practices are. The other thing I think is sort of how do you look at performance versus the benchmark? So the benchmark doesn't take into account the amount that's provided from the MEOS payments or the 4% discount, which is supposed to neutralize that. So practices are doing better with respect to the benchmark. About 3/4 of practices, from what we understand, are under benchmark. But there's still a concern there on how people are doing with respect to performance-based payments. And what this means is the upshot of it is that if practices are going to stay in OCM, a good proportion of them most likely would need to go to a downside risk model.